Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 7th episode of HSBG Podcast. I'm your host, Collins, here with Shady Bunny. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. How
I
are
feel
you
like
this week, Mr. Collins?
I feel like I say this intro like every time. Hey, hi, hello, Shady's here.
We gotta have some routine, right?
Yeah, but it's good to have you here. It's been a interesting week. A lot of things going on in the Hearthstone scene. But let's get right into it with the first topic, the overview of Battlegrounds this week. For me, I've been playing a little bit, just kind of, trying the new stuff. It's kind of been very similar with the past weeks. Just hasn't been too many like meta shifts, I would say, this week or so. But just been playing a lot of the heroes. I've been, just playing the fun stuff, at least for me. So a lot of cleaves, a lot of dragons, that kind of thing. It's been going generally well. I would say. How about you, Shay?
I'm just having a great time with the game still. I feel like comfortable on 14k now. It's been now, a couple weeks ago I would get 13 and then I just like hover around, but I wouldn't
Right.
bounce all the way back. It's the same thing now where I'm just like 200 up, 200 down, just going in between.
I know that life. It's
Yeah, right. You feel like, oh, I belong here now, right? It's like, okay, this wasn't just, like I may have struck up there and then I fell down. But I had an amazing game this morning where the game just kept giving me more Caligos. So I played 5 Caligos, and that was good. That was
never
fun.
enough. That's how I
Yeah, it
feel.
was just like, well, okay, I'll take another one. Oh, okay, sure. I was actually like maybe holding the other one because I had to sell like an average Amalgadon for it. The chat was like, "No, people riot. You have to play the 5th one." So,
Yeah.
I got
Sometimes I'm like, do I want 5th Amalgadon or first Nadina? That's me. Like, which
yeah,
one?
like Kelly, right? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, those kind of games. Yeah, overall, great fun. Lots of fun with the game for sure.
Sounds good. Going right into the topics, the card we'll be discussing for the minions this week is Cave Hydra. Now, I think Cave Hydra is a interesting minion, just kind of polarizing. Just
Apparently, my volume is a little low. Sorry for interrupting.
My volume's a little low.
No, my volume apparently is too low.
Okay, I can see if I can raise you up.
Yeah, sorry. It's just, I mean, I can check my microphone as well, but I'm pretty sure I haven't changed any of my settings. Live recording, ladies and gentlemen, live recording.
Yeah, usually we don't have these issues, but yeah, sometimes it happens.
Oh, I got a live audience here to tell us when the tech is.
Is that louder or no?
Hello.
Yeah. I got it.
All right, excellent.
This should be better.
Now we can get down to business.
Yeah. Anyways, Cave Hydra. I think Cave Hydra is interesting because there are some situations where you pick this up and it's really good for you. It really depends on the hero that you pick up. If you have heroes that can buff stats manually, things like that, right? You can just pick it up, start buffing it manually, and be good to go. Another times, if you have the right composition, Naudry works well. If you have Brand, Lightfang, right? Having a Cave Hydra really does a lot of work, especially to the mid to late game when it has A10 plus attack. You can really kill 3 minions off with one. Really nice is if you kill multiple minions and it's still alive, you can get that extra cleave going. But generally, that doesn't always happen. That's not always the case. So if you're just picking up randomly, you don't have any way of buffing it, no transitional pieces, you're not going beasts or anything like that. It just kind of feels a little weak at the 2-4 cleave, which sometimes does something, but once you get past the early game, it really falls off really hard. So you have to know when to pick this hero up. You have to, not this minion up, you have to know, oh, will I be able to form a composition around it? Will I be able to make it stronger? Things like that. Because if you don't make it stronger, it really isn't a minion at all. So it's one of those interesting minions that requires a bit of thought. Sometimes when you pick it up, can I utilize it well? Or is it just like a waste of gold?
I think most of the time this minion's a waste of gold, but when it's not, it's
Damn,
very
son.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'll put it this way: most of the time when I feel like my chat would buy it, it would be a waste of gold just because it's we love Hydra. Hydra's so strong. Oh my god, you could find a brand later on. Just pick it now. We can make it huge, right? But it's one of those cards that you don't take until you have the engine, right? If you don't have the brand, if you don't have the Light Fang. Sometimes I guess on Mukla it's fine. Where the way I like to play Mukla is I like to arrive at tier 4 when I have, say, 6 bananas ready to go. So then, of course, when you open it, it's instantly an 8 damage cleave, if not more, with your. But usually it'll be a 10 damage cleave because I'll hero power on the turn as well. So there are some exceptions, right? You can hit Rakanishu, right? Rakanishu can hit the Hydra. But if there's no engine, if you can't immediately boost the attack quite a bit, then it's just a 2/4 and it just doesn't do anything. So it's one of those things where you don't buy the furniture before you have the house, right? The house being the brand of the
Get the furniture. Let's
Get it
go.
anyway.
You know, I'm
Believe in the house.
just sleep on it. You know, it will carry you theoretically, right? Yeah, it's true, right? As a 2/4, it really doesn't do a lot. I think it's one of those cards. When you're just starting out, you tend to be like, "Oh, this is amazing! Oh, it's the cleave, so good, right?" But then the more you play, you kind of realize, 2/4 doesn't actually do that much. You know, it doesn't save you from losing really. But it's when it has that early buffs, right? That sometimes you see people buy this and buy like the Houndmaster to make it a 4/6 super early, and you're like, hi, but you're taunting it. But they know that, oh, as a 2/4, it's gonna do nothing, and as a 4/6, it might do nothing, but it might be able to cleave something, and then even though it dies immediately, it'd still be more valuable than the 2/4 cleave. So
Yeah.
I see that
I
happen
feel
sometimes.
I feel these days on tier 4, I don't know in what circumstance I would want to settle for Cave Hydra Houndmaster
Nah,
or like if
yeah,
you look
sure.
at
I'm not saying
no, it's fair. It's fair.
you know
Yeah.
this is the optimal line. I
I'm
just
just saying, like, I guess that's why maybe the cards, the average power level changed, right? They introduced stuff like Harbinger. When Harbinger is a card on tier 4, you'd be like, what are you buying a Hydra for? Right?
sometimes you get an early 3, early 4, and Hydra's the best option. You know that happens sometimes, probably.
A rough game ahead, yeah. Sure.
That's,
You take your last roll, right? You're down to 3 gold. You're like, well, this is the shop where I have to buy, and it's all Hydra. So you're just like, Bob.
it happens sometimes. You know these situations are not new, so
Sure, you can get forced into buying
yeah,
it. Yeah.
not a card you should always take. A card you definitely have to be aware of the situation and your game plan when you pick it up, but can be really good, right? We've all seen, 20 plus, 30 plus attack Hydras just destroying your whole board, and you're just like, yeah, and especially when they don't have taunt. And they're just like, oh, I'm coming in for round 2. And you're just like, how did I lose this game? How did I lose this match? Only the Hydra was the only relevant minion on this board. And it's just so like thing. I've had that happen a couple of times. So, yeah, can be good, but you have to be careful.
Yeah. And there's the obvious, like, I have Goldrin Macaw, then Cave Hydra is pretty much the best beast to buff.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how you beat shields, right? You get 3 shields off.
Yeah. In Beastcom, this is a really, really powerful card because you're getting those stats immediately. So even when it starts at 2/4 and get that Golden Baron buff, boom, it's big boy. It's a yes, it's a nice one. So that's generally our thoughts on Cave Hydra. Definitely something you should play when you have the right opportunities for it, but not something you should always pick up instantly. It will hurt you more than it will help you probably if you pick it up every time. So yeah. Next card we're talking about, next hero we're talking about will be Alakir. Speaking of minions that do well with a hero power, a hero power that can utilize it. Cave Hydra definitely, if you can buff it up, give that Divine Shield, Wind Fury on a Hydra. Ooh, I've seen that happen and it hurts every time I see it. So yeah, definitely a hero that can utilize cleaves and things like that, but this is more of an early game hero, I would say, in that it's tough to lose early. Not that you can't lose. I mean, there are other heroes that can definitely whip you in the early game. But generally, having the Divine Shield value has a lot of benefits in mitigating damage in the early game, and there are also ways to utilize it in the mid to late game as well, right? Being able, Wind Fury has value sometimes, Taunt has value sometimes, Divine Shield pretty much always has value. It's kind of hard to create a situation where you don't want that Divine Shield in the beginning. So um, it has a lot of unique effects that other heroes don't have access to, but can be utilized, especially in the early game, sometimes in the mid game, sometimes in the late game as well.
Yep. Yeah, I don't often die to mid game Alakir, but when I do, a large Hydra was involved for sure. Or it just chunks your entire board, and you're like, well, taking 18 damage on, I don't know, what is this, 10 gold or something, because there's Alakir just soloed my board with the Hydra. Yeah, overall, I would say this is sort of the definition of just okay hero. Just like, all right, just, you're never going to have. Sometimes you have a hero where you say, oh, I didn't have a hero power this game. I didn't get to use it. I didn't find anything good to synergize with my hero power. Alakir never has that. It's always there. You're pretty much starting with 5 extra health. Like you said, you just don't lose early. The amount of times I take alley cats and I'm just like, yep, 5 extra health because Divine Shield, baby, right? The alley cats still, like, they have the 2/2 reborn Acolyte of Cthulhu. You're like, no problem. Divine Shield alley cats still ties that. So that's nice. I'd say Alakir is one of the heroes that can power level pretty decently if it's a good lobby to power level, which for me is Mechs and Dragons. Mechs and Dragons for me have probably the best 3 drops to stabilize with. So you go fast tier 3, and then you just put a decent minion in position 1, and sometimes you start stabilizing on 6 gold already, where you would power level on 5 gold, you go to tier 3, and then on 6 gold you find, say, an arm or like a clunker and a sensei, and you just go like, all right, sensei, clunker, boom, 4/4 with Divine Shield, Wind Fury, and you just start tying already, and then you start winning next round. So it's one of those heroes that can power level efficiently because the hero power is a little pick me up.
Yeah. And another thing I like to do with Alakir is just beasts. Since Macaw is I would say probably the best composition to run with this hero, just because you're getting the golden buff twice, right? So if you have like a golden Macaw, you have a golden, anything really, you're getting so much extra value that other heroes wouldn't be able to replicate. So the difficult part is getting that composition right, getting that gold run, and then having all and being safe and all that stuff. But if you can pull off the Macaw gold run composition with this and getting that safety net, it really does a lot of work. So that's generally a minion type I like to look for when I'm picking this hero. If beasts are in the lobby, right, it opens up that possibility. So I do like looking for that when I'm picking this hero, but generally I still think it's a pretty good early safe hero. If there aren't any power picks in your options, then you can always pick this up and just hope to at least go for a good mid game or something like that, where you can try to top 4 or so, and if you get lucky, do a little bit better. So I do think it's a pickable hero. Definitely play with it quite a bit, and sometimes it doesn't work out, right? Some people can easily have advantages that are better than the Divine Shield, but it should be able to get you into some place where you can at least have a chance of doing something.
Yeah, the Macaw spawn early is usually, if I'm gonna get gold run online, that's how it happens, where
right.
Somehow I just pick a spawn where I didn't power level. Let's say I get Sarlacc can spawn in the same shop, and I'm just, okay, that's cool. And then on 8 gold, you open a Macaw, and you're like, oh, cool. Okay, now I have Macaw with Wind Fury, Divine Shield, and then a spawn on the same board. And then you just pick up another bird, and you're like, I'm pretty healthy. I can probably tier up to 5 to grab a 6 drop. Oh, look, it's a gold run. And then that's usually how the comp comes online for me if I end up in that comp. I'd say the number one piece of advice, at least for myself, that really upped my Alakir game is try to have a Murloc on your board, and then on tier 4, if you hit a Toxfin, suddenly Murloc goes into position 1, Toxfin on the Murloc. You now have a Poison, Wind Fury, Divine Shield Murloc. That's pretty much kill 2 things in the mid game. And in the mid game, people oftentimes just focus stats and they have big taunt, right? Some people might have a golden Wrathweaver taunted and you just go like, boop, boop, just 20 dead, 20 health Wrathweaver, but dead, and then just kill another thing. That happens quite often for me with Alakir. And I'd say the games where I didn't do well is like, ah, damn, I didn't have a Murloc. I couldn't play the Toxfin. Then you just have 6 units and you have your number 1 guy, which is gonna kill 2 things, or at the very least pop a shield and kill a thing. It's still quite efficient.
Yeah, that's always I think that's always a really good mid to late game play, right? Getting a poison Murloc in the front, right, and being able to kill 2. So I do like that. I think that's a very good suggestion. If you can end like in the mid game, or more like the late game or mid to late game, if you can end your board with a poison Murloc, that really can be the difference maker in some matchups. So definitely a good suggestion there to utilize his hero power very, very well. But yeah, that's going to be our topic for the heroes. Moving on, our next topic will be an updated discussion on Barren Blacksmith. It's been in the meta now for a couple of weeks, so I think it's good to really go over this minion again. I see the Shady's emotions are quite visible. If you want to start us off here, feel free.
I hate it. I absolutely hate the card. I want it gone. I want it dead, buried, forgotten, just traumas. I have so many games where I just feel like I don't get to play the game because I took 18 damage from someone that power leveled and got 1 or 2 of these copies. It's just ridiculous. Or it's happened a couple of times now where a Reno will just hero power it and we're just taking obscene amounts of damage because nothing is dying, right? Everything gets +4/+4. The Blacksmith itself is not going to die, and it's not taunted, so that's an extra 3 stars on the board. It's just, it's brutal. So many of my games, I just feel like I'm forced into not playing for number 1 anymore because I had an early encounter with someone that power leveled and got a Blacksmith. It's the same thing for me when I power level and I see a Blacksmith. I'm like, oh, well, let's just cheese some people. Because the reason why I say power level, it's people aren't playing around it yet, right? Let's say you power level on 5 gold and on 6 gold you hit a Blacksmith. There's just, it's so incredibly unlikely that it's not going to go off. It's pretty much guaranteed. Let's say at 8 gold, 8, 9 gold, that's maybe when, you consistently start running into stuff where it's not popping off, but it finds acolytes. You're pretty much like selling your acolytes out of fear that you're going to get Blacksmith. Whew, yeah, it's just the inherent design feels very off because it's not an OP card by any means, but it has this very limited window into the game where it ends games for people. And I feel like it's just very unfun to play against. Like, let's say a power leveler hits this Blacksmith, the next 2 opponents, their game is quasi over because they take an unreasonable amount of damage this early on in the game. And then the card after that becomes kind of useless, right? Where you have those 2-3 turns of glory and then throw it in the trash. And if you want to buy it, there's always that inherent risk, oh, it might not do anything. So it's not even that it's consistently OP, it's just this flip a coin thing, which introduces even more variance into the game. Like the worst feeling is you literally have 2 taunts, right? One will kill it and one won't. And it's like, well, okay, 50% to take a crap load of damage, I guess. It feels so awful. Like it's literally a coin flip at that point. So yeah, it's just overall a feel bad card. Destroys your game if you get hit by it early. Yeah, not a fan whatsoever.
All right. Now, my opinion, I love no.
This is why everyone should take as many black as they want.
I maybe not as opinionated, I guess. Yeah, passionate about this, but I do.
I've been jamming 10 hours.
I do think it does coin flip some matchups. There's definitely been some times where I'll see my opponent have it, and I won't have any taunts, and I'll have like 4 minions that will kill it, 3 minions that won't, right? If it hits the minion and it dies, then I win the battle. If it doesn't hit the minion, I take 16. right? Those,
Yeah,
those are
exactly.
the options. And it's just like, huh, okay, well, now my game is over because I lost a, maybe like the 60 percenter in like turn 6, turn 7, right? Like now I'm in single digits, or maybe I'm like 10 to 20 HP, and I can't like play aggressive or something. I can't play for first, really, because that one turn of weakness might be too much. So it's one of those minions that can really warp your own gameplay while not changing anyone else's gameplay, right? If you're the unlucky uh, person that fights, the leveler during that 1 or 2 turns that can really punish you, then you're basically behind the rest of the game, right? And you have to recover, while everyone else doesn't deal with that problem, right? No one else is fighting that dude. It's just you specifically, F you in particular, says the game, right? You're
Yeah.
fighting him. And then everyone else is like, oh, what's the problem? I dealt with it really well. It's like, yeah, that the window is over. Now it doesn't work as well. He sold it, et cetera, et cetera. So um, it just adds if they, and it's in every game, right? It's one it's the same thing, right? It's not something you can avoid or play around, right? Because you're always gonna see
Yeah.
it. Um, and it's just one of those windows where, oh, are you losing like 2 50-50s, or losing 2 percentage points, where one, you're fighting him in that window, and then you're losing the RNG of the attacks, or you're running a taunt that can't deal with it. And then, oh, okay, the game's over for you. You have to play it for maybe top 5 or something like that now. So it's an interesting card. um I always think, how do you make, things strong and fun, or not frustrating for specific people, right? This is not one of those cards. We kind of talked about it when it was being revealed, that it might be one of those cards that warps the meta, might not be very hit or miss, right, for some people, right? And Shay's definitely been in the brunt of it, being the one who's who's getting those hits, and is feeling the pressure there. I don't know necessarily what to do with this card to kind of make it um a little bit better, if not outright remove it. But it is one of those cards that it's not the only one that has those type of issues, those type of problems, but it's definitely been the most recent one, and one of the more swingy ones, especially like the earlier that cards do things. This isn't a one-to-one comparison, but it reminds me of the 3-drop that could change into any card. I don't you
Zerus.
Zerus, yeah, it reminds me of Zerus, right? Where, oh, did you hit like a full Reaper turn 5? Here you go, the game's done.
Yeah.
This one's a little bit better because you're affecting your opponent instead of affecting yourself, right? Where, like, you're not having like a random gas curler and then, oh, you've won the game already. Like, it's, or a random Caligos, oh, you've won the game already. It's like, hi, I'm gonna screw over someone else, instead of just winning the game. It kind of reminds me of that, where it feels a little bit unfun if you're on the receiving end. Fun if you're the one with the free foe reaper, but unfun if you're playing a regular game, your opponent has a full reaper, they're like Tavern 2, and you're just like, huh, how did that happen? Oh yeah, they hit those errors, that kind of thing. But I don't know what to do with it. Some people say remove it. Some people say adjusting. Adjusting can be hard, right? Because you still have to make it a pickable card. You don't want to like neuter it to where it can't do anything at all. But
Remove. I don't know. It feels like the whole frenzy mechanic just doesn't make sense.
well, it's the only frenzy mechanic we have, right? So, there's design space left, right?
Sure.
This is the first one being introduced,
I
right?
feel like you don't want to have like a super big effect attached to frenzy, because there's okay, so BGs, it's already pretty random where you guys are gonna hit, but at least you can look at a comp and sort of evaluate the strength and said, okay, this is gonna win most of the time. But if most of the fights are gonna come down to, well, obviously we're gonna have to see if the frenzy minion goes off, because if it goes off, then obviously the other guy's totally fucked, right? I
It's
don't think that's a
basically
good.
gas crawler.
Right. Well, gas spoiler. Well, it's a 6-drop first of all, and yeah,
Fair enough.
gas spoiler can, like, especially when there's Barren, you're like, oh god, not 5 boats, right? It's just
Yeah.
like, yeah, you can die, right, for
Yeah.
sure. You can. There's like every BG player that's played quite a bit has that fear when you just see a board and it's like 4 minions and it's like 2 Chads and a Taunted Steeds, and you're like, oh my god, no, don't kill me. Like, this is just, I'm either gonna die or it's gonna be nothing, right? Depending on out of the Sneeds. Or if you can somehow, the Chads die before the Sneeds. Yeah, it definitely has that feel to it where you look at that card and you're like, well, all depends on if the card lives or dies. So that's why it feels like Frenzy is so awkward, where it's so obvious that you see the minion on the board and that's just what's going to determine the fight. So if it was a very mild effect, then obviously it wouldn't have that impact, right?
Yeah. I do think like well static cards with like decent effects, not game swinging effects, is pretty good for Frenzy, right? Like let's say it had like a bomb effect on Frenzy, like okay, like whatever, it's a bomb.
Sure, like an upside, right?
Yeah.
And if you need to restat it or whatnot, like sure, but just have it be a nice little, ooh, I get the frenzy, right?
Yeah.
Not so much like, oh, my golden spawn on my board and it
Yeah.
spawns survive and deals space damage, right? It's just like, it shouldn't be like that, like, oh, completely shitting on the opponent.
This one card wins me the whole fights for the next 3
Yeah.
turns, whether it hits or not, yeah, that's probably where it starts becoming problematic and unfun for the people involved, because it feels like there's, especially early, it's hard to have counterplay early in the game, right? So the earlier you introduce like super RNG effects, right, the harder it is to counterplay, right? Gas Curler, right, you can, it's late enough where you can start like finding pieces to try to deal, finding zaps and things like that to deal. But earlier on, right, you're kind of just like scrambling for a decent board, a decent comp, and even if they have a Blacksmith, sometimes you still can't deal with it. Like let's say, hey, your opponent has a Blacksmith, like it tells you, when before, like you still, like there'll be some, like a lot of turns where you're like, well, okay, now I know I'm gonna take 16, okay, like it doesn't change what you do because it's too early in the game to find a counter piece. So it's just tough to deal with, and it's hard to balance because of how swingy and hit or miss the effect is for this particular Frenzy minion. But that's just our updated discussion about this card. Not fun to play with, and it can cause some frustrations for people that play a lot and deal with this card on a daily. So definitely wanted to throw that out there here. Moving on, you have any final, little like, I'll remove this card.
I guess if you were to throw a comparison out for the limited experience I've had so far in the game, in the spell meta, you would just have this thing. All right, well, it's 8 gold. Let's see if he has 2 Elizas, right? And it feels like this, like where it's like, oh, okay, whoever is fighting the guy with the 2 Elizas is just dead. You didn't get to play the game because turn 8, you got such a big swing. It feels similarly to if you have someone with 2 Blacksmiths early, it's like, oh, okay, sure, I don't get to play the game. Only this is even earlier than turn 8.
Yeah. All right. Next topic, we shall be continuing our discussion on the best tier units of each, tavern tier. We're at Tavern 3. We're halfway there theoretically until we get to the dreaded Tavern 7 units. Oh no, but I just put a couple of tier 3s that I think are unique enough to warrant some type of discussion. But I think there are a lot of Tavern 3s that have some potential in the meta right now. Just these are kind of my current, thoughts. Just like, not all of them, but I think in terms of just like a pure stat bot, Bronze Warden kind of takes the cake, because you pick it up and you're like, yeah, this is gonna keep me alive. I didn't put Barren Blacksmith in here because it's right before we were just talked about it. I felt like it's already getting its own separate discussion. Let's leave it out here, but definitely that one can fit if you get it early. It can definitely be the swinger for you too. So I do want to mention that as well. But there are a lot of like little good. This is why people like leveling to 3 early if mechs and dragons are in, right? Because you can hit Deflecto, you can hit Iron Sensei, you can hit Bronze Ward, and you can hit Hank. I was considering putting Hank in here, but I knew Shady would look at me weird.
Yeah, it's like an arm, but it's got 1 less health and it doesn't buff the attack of taunts.
And you just gotta win, you know. Hank is
Win
so
for it.
good, you know. Just be better than your opponent. But yeah, you know, it's in there. There's also, you know, Murloc synergies if you really want to commit to Murlocs early, and things like that. There's a lot of Divine Shield units on 3 that you could utilize to stabilize. Arm obviously has value. You can make whole compositions with Arm. Khadgar is one of those minions that doesn't usually feel strong early. But if you have the right compositions, if you're playing, you know, Jandis, if you're playing Pirate Scam, right, could really be the key piece to make your composition feel strong and work out. So I wanted to throw it in there, not as a tempo unit, but one of those like unique core 3 drops that doesn't have a replacement, right? You can't really replace a Khadgar with anything else in the game. I mean, sometimes Barren, but you know, why not have both if you're gonna do that? So, yeah. Any other thoughts on these ones, and any other ones you want to talk about? I still have some in my head that this also works. This is also a really good one.
So I'd say one of the cards that's a bit overrated is God, I always call it a whirly, but it's the Elemental, the 4/1 Wind Fury. Yeah. The name eludes me right now, but
Crackling Cyclone.
Yeah, Cyclone. Yeah. So that one goes 1 for 1 with an Acolyte. Just to throw that out there. So that happens a lot where people like get the Cyclone, like, hey, let's throw it in the front. Let's go in there and wreck some 4/4s. I'm just gonna hit 2 4/4s, right? That's what's gonna happen. I'm just gonna, and then it just goes into a little Acolyte, like hit it once, hit it twice.
So I would say don't put it in the front. Don't
put it in front. That's a good start.
Yeah, that's my adjustment.
But even then, there's like ritualists. Still, like there's a decent amount of small taunts out there. So, and then if you put it too far back, then it's gonna start bumping into a token, right? When one spawn. So yeah, it feels like a bit of an overhyped early game card. Obviously, it's great if you have some scaling, if you're Cthulhu or whatnot. And sure, it's pretty much a Deflecto at that point until you get resets. But yeah, Deflecto's great. Bronze Warden's great. Love Arm. Arm's another thing with Alakir. That's a small little thing where Alakir will give your first position Divine Shield taunt.
Put that Cave Hydra first. You have to get that Arm buff.
Turns out Arm kind of likes Divine Shield taunt. No, Sensei is another one, right? Especially if you're rushing 3, it's so good. You open that double Sensei's shop, you just go, oh baby. Just
now you're speaking my language. It's basically Hank, you know.
Double value. It's like Hank, guaranteed. I'm thinking about like tier 3 if there's anything specific. So the Murloc stuff is usually a whiff, right? When you hit that early. Then beast stuff, not really. Yeah, it's really the mechs and the dragons that stand
demons
out.
as well. I wanted to mention.
So the Devourer is one of the reasons we talked about that with Hapa on last week's show. It's so free, right? It's one of those cards where if you have a demon on the board, just like, ooh, now I can just level and buy it anyway, and then I'm strong, right? I gain some stats, and I can still get the level. So that's indeed one of the better ones.
And juggler as well, right? If you get 2 imprisoners or whatever, you see a random juggler, you're like, okay, I've won the early game, you know, that kind of thing. Where it frees you to either, you know, heavy commit or go a little bit aggressive and just like not worry about taking too much damage, because you know the juggler imprisoner combo is gonna reduce a lot of health that you might be taking otherwise. So I do think the demons are also another thing you want to consider, especially if you start with demon synergy right off the bat.
I think in a current meta, it's pretty much just like Arm takes the cake for sure. Where, at least for me, where that's one of the most influential 3 mana cards or 3 gold cards, where if you, or tier 3 cards, I suppose, where you see an Arm in the shop and it's like, ooh, okay, cool. I could just take that, and it's so good that I've played ARM and just non-ARM comps where I had this was actually so silly. I had a first place game, I think yesterday or so, where I had two arms and I had the option to play two light fangs, and I had a decent spread, but the arms were just better because I would just farm more attack. I had a battle master and I had a bronze warden, both taunted, and I had the option of just going to light fangs. It's like, it's just worse, right? It's just I farm so much more attack, and like the health doesn't really matter that much on a dragon. And the BM, especially once it gets so much HP, you just want to farm more attack on it. So that was one of those weird moments where it just hit me that as long as you just have, say, a module, or you fabricate your own divine shield taunt, you can play pretty much any comp and just have arm plus your taunts on the side. So that's when it really hit me like, oh man, this unit, it's actually pretty damn versatile. Just to kind of hit a module pretty much.
Okay, yeah, that's what those games I'll be watching with disgust.
I hate it. Skip a light fang. Oh, I can't believe it.
But I can see the logic there. Yes, it makes sense. But
It depends on who you're playing against.
The
right?
principle
This was
of
very
it, how could you just
yeah.
give light?
Obviously, if I have the choice between two light fangs and two arms, most games I want two light fangs. But the fact that it was just on the board where I said, it's actually just better to have the arm, right? Because the BM already has a lot of attack and I've got divine shields. Yeah.
All right, yeah, okay, sure. I mean, yeah. All right, well, okay. There's still a couple more 3-drops we want to mention. Warden of Old, right? The 3-drop that gives you gold. Definitely something, if you pick it up early. We've seen games where Reno will hero power it super early and just use that 2 gold per turn to get a lot of hyper leveling tempo and things like that. So that's a card you can look at. I've seen games where you have it with Macaw, right? So you're macawing the gold and then you're getting more gold, and then you got to utilize the gold efficiently to do things. Rat Pack was a minion that used to be really, really popular, really, really good, especially when it was on Tavern 3, right? But the Tavern 2, but the change to Tavern 3 is really, kicked it down quite a few notches. You really only see it never. I mean, you really don't see this card anymore. Only when you're playing Deathwing or playing against a Deathwing, sometimes people pick it up just to have that value, but it generally hasn't been too popular, too dominant in this meta at the moment. So it's just kind of interesting how one change in Tavern tier can really change how you view a card and how strong it is. So I thought that was pretty interesting, pretty something to discuss. And the other,
yeah, for sure. Yeah, go ahead.
The other cards are more of a buffing variety. If you have an archetype, then you use it to buff. With Bloodsail, Cannoneer, Arcane Assistant, Coalight Seer, right? They're not cards that really stand on their own. They're really cards that feel good once you have a composition, and then you can utilize them to make things better. So that's what tier 3 has a lot of, just supplemental cards that feel good once you already are committed to a composition. So they're not really cards you look for on 3 and be happy about. You kind of look for once you have your board, and then you're like, oh, Seer is great, Navigator is great, Cannoneer is great. You got 2 Hoggers, things like that. Houndmaster can be great. Menace can be great. Menace can stand on its own sometimes. I will admit it's one of those like tempo 3s that has other value, but a lot of the other ones are more supplemental. I will use this to make my current composition better.
Yeah, and that's just a reminder on why you shouldn't be power leveling if mechs and dragons are out, because your shops are going to be full of those. Oh, these cards are great if I have a board full of pirates, if I have a board full of murlocs, if I have a beast that I can taunt. And you just don't want to play those cards when your board is empty, obviously.
Yeah, there are a lot worse. So that's the Shady talks about this, right? Leveling to 3 when the beast and murlocs, and not mechs and Mechs and Dragons. Wow, Beasts and Murlocs. How did I get that? Mechs
When
and
they when
Dragons.
beats the Murlocs are out, that's what we love, because then we love
And Mechs and Dragons are in because you get a lot of those power tempo threes that you can really utilize to stabilize the game and then go from there. Where if those are out of the pool, you're getting more of those supplemental threes that can't stabilize, and it reduces your chance of really finding those key pieces to not take too much damage early. So definitely a good reminder about doing or keeping that in mind when you're leveling and playing the game. But
I guess another one, like a small note on Khadgar, where while Khadgar is for the most part a techie unit, something you play later in the game, there are, like, first of all, if you're Greybow and you have anything that spawns Death Rattle, Khadgar is pretty amazing because it will not just copy the already big. Let's say your kindly grandma dies and it spawns a 4/4. Greybow's ability will proc a second time on the second grandma that spawns from the chat, so you will now have a 6 health big bad wolf from the grandma. So early Khadgar on Greybow can definitely work. And sometimes if you're desperate, I know I have bad boards where I had 2 acolytes and I'm just, well, I guess I can add a Khadgar and these acolytes are going to reborn and spawn 2 more taunts, and maybe it does something. So I guess the cheesiest board I've had was 2 Bronze Wardens with 2 Khadgars, and then every time a Bronze Warden dies, boop, you get 2 more. It's just
dude, that reminded me when Elystra, was that the name of the card, was in the game? Yeah.
4/4, the
It was a
Khadgar.
7/7.
Ah,
I saw the games where someone had an early one or an early Elystra with 2 Khadgars and just like full board of 7/7 tier 6 minions hitting you for like 26. Way too early in the game for it to be reasonable, and I was just like, this is not healthy at all. You know, so yeah, just reminded me of that. But yeah, that's just our discussion on tier 3 units. A lot of good ones if you can get it early, if mechs and dragons are in the pool. So you know, interesting tavern tier. We'll see how the other tavern tiers shape up. Next thing we're talking about is mech lobbies versus non-mech lobbies. We haven't really talked about the differences between different minion types and how to play the game different, right? Sometimes we'll sprinkle in, oh, you know, if this is in the pool, this hero's worse, or if this is in the pool, this hero's better, or if this is in the pool, this strategy's better, right? But we haven't really talked about, as a core, as a topic, what is the difference between not seeing Murlocs and then seeing Murlocs, or not seeing mechs and seeing mechs? And I think mechs is a good one to branch or to start the discussion about, just because it's so influential, I guess, right? You feel it when mechs are not in, whereas some of the other minion types, when they're not in, sometimes you don't even notice it. Like, it's like, oh, you know, demons are not in. You know, didn't really notice it this game, you know. But mechs you always notice, because I think mechs and Murlocs are probably the two that you pretty much always notice, just because they can really adjust how you play your game, right? If you know there's no Murlocs, you can really do some compositions where you wouldn't really feel safe doing it, because you know the insta Murloc punish is right there. But when they're not in, you can afford to have like a 50 500 battle master and be like, you know, what's the chance? Have an answer.
It starts to be a win con, right? You
Yeah.
can just have a, you know, like, let's say you're building a huge molten rock or Gar or something like that. You're like, well, good luck dealing 500 damage, right?
I love how the topic is mechs lobbies, and then we're like, oh, Murlocs, let's talk
Yeah,
about
for
that.
sure. Well, I mean, free small, right? Free small.
Oh man.
All right. So,
Go for
mech
it.
lobbies. So the way how I approach mech lobbies versus non-mech lobbies. So for me, the way how I structure my games is, am I either going to try to high roll for a win or not? And I think any hero can high roll and win, but most of the time, it is a result of, you know, do you get to play your Maiev? Do you get to play the Rafam? Do you get to play Hook Tusk? What these heroes have in common is very easy access to tier 1 pairs, and tier 1 pairs are very easy to triple, which then means very easy access to early 5 drops, early 6 drops, and that is how you scale and how you get ahead of the lobby, right? So that's what we mean with a high roll, early triple into a scaling unit, and you get so far ahead of the lobby that they cannot catch up. So what do you do then if you are not high rolling? For me, that recipe is, oh, I'm just going to stay on tier 4 and I'm going to just spam roll on tier 4. What are some of the best units you're rolling for on tier 4? Egg and module. That's one of the things that's so beautiful. If you get an arm, an egg, and a module, that does so much work because you get a 9 health Divine Shield taunt minion that will get enough attack to pretty much one-shot anything over the course of a few turns if you have 1 or 2 arms buffing it. And that option is just gone when mechs are out. So whenever I'm in a, I suppose whenever I'm in a non-mech lobby and I have the choice of picking my heroes, I start looking at, okay, which hero here does not need to spam on tier 4? So let's say I'm playing a Kale Thas. Kale really likes to just go to tier 4 and then just like, ooh, I get, this egg with an extra buff, or I get this deflecto with an extra buff. Scam Kazurak, secret guy, right?
Secret guy.
Loves mechs, loves tier 4, loves to get a module on something, loves to just spam the flectos. Mukla, same thing, loves to just hard force taunt comp, loves to, and taunt comp is heavily hindered with the loss of module because Divine Shield and taunt in one package makes it so much easier to get taunt comp off the ground. If you have to find a Divine Shield Elemental, find a Divine Shield Dragon, find an Argus, that's so much more work than just, ooh, module and arm, boom, ready to go, right? So I start looking at my heroes in a way, okay, which one of you can do without spamming on tier 4? So then something like a Ysera might suddenly become more appealing because I know that there's less tempo in the lobby, there's less people spamming tier 4 and getting really strong early. And with Ysera, I can just make dragon pairs and then just get a Caligos and high roll. So I call them non-mech lobby games. I call them high roll games because I think in non-mech lobbies, most people, whether they know it or not, are going to try to just triple into 5s and 6s as opposed to playing more tempo on tier 4. Just because tier 4 is a lot worse. So that's instinctively where I'm going at right now. If I see the no-mech lobby, I'm going to try really hard to play something that can make triples a lot easier. Something like a Zephrys would be a great example. Ysera is a more low roll answer, but she becomes a lot better when the tempo heroes get worse. Like let's say something like a Rakanishu gets a ton worse if mechs are out. Whereas if mechs are in, that's actually a pretty solid tempo choice.
Yeah, for me, when I have non-mechs, I'm always going to 5. I do notice that it's a lot of times when I stay on 4, it's either taunt or mechs, and when mechs are gone, it's like, well, taunt's gone, mechs gone. it really like encourages me to just get to 5 and see if I can find those compositions. So I do notice it's a harder for me to stay on 4, at least my reasoning, to if mechs are gone, just because I lose a lot of the pushes towards staying on 4, right? If I get like 2 deflectos, sometimes I'm just like, I'm going taunt, I don't really care, it's a lot easier to play this than leveling and hoping that I hit something. So I just kind of let it work out. And sometimes mechs can definitely win lobbies, especially if you got an early double deflecto star and they have resets and things like that. So it's not, I don't feel bad about doing it, right? But when it's gone, right, it's a lot harder to just be like, I'll find like some type of Murloc or Dragon synergy on 4 and stay there. That is something I do notice. But in general, what I do notice is that a lot of people don't have the Divine Shield Amalgadons is easily, right? You'll see a lot of Amalgadons without Divine Shield, and you're like, yeah, it's because they can't put another modules on it and things like that. So it is something I do notice, that there's a lack of like that OP nonsense at the end where people just have like double 4 Reaper cleave or Amalgadon cleave, Amalgadon Divine Shield poison, right? It's a lot harder. You'll see a lot more like golden Amalgadons when mechs aren't there, because people are like, okay, triple. I mean, I can't get Divine Shield any other way. I guess I'll just combine them and then see if I get it that way. So I do notice that a little bit, and just like more failures. Like more bad compositions, right? So sometimes I'll play games, and then after the end of the game I was like, wow, that lobby was really weak, and then I'll just look, and I'll say, yeah, there was no mechs in that lobby, because people are trying, right? They're going for sixes and stuff like that, they're not hitting it, and then they're just like scrambling to find a comp on tier 5, and they don't know what to do, and then people just get like blown out, right? The one person that commits to like jugglers or whatever just blows people out. You're just like, damn, that was a quick game. And it's because like mechs give you a lot of like the tools to stabilize into that OP-ness, where without the mechs, a lot of people just like try, and then if they don't hit stuff, they don't know what to do, right? Where if you go on and get a bad 6 and there's no mechs, right? You can't really transition as easily as you can of like, oh, I found an Annoyer module, I found a Steeds, I'll put that there, I have got a good filler to make my composition, right? It's like, okay, I need to find like Mama Barren, so I need to do all this stuff instantly, and it's not a skill set that you practice or can easily be practiced as well, right? Where you can't do like a practice tool where you're like, okay, I'm tier 5, no mechs in the lobby, I have no composition, let's figure it out, right? There's no way to like put that as an option where you can practice it over and over and over and over, right? Where it's like you get good at it, it's like, okay, this happens like 1 out of every like 20 30 plus games, right? So it's almost novel every time you see it, right? You're like, oh, this is new to me, because I never get to practice this often. So it's just something that I see a lot that people tend to struggle with, just dealing with the lack of mechs, just because it's not like the most powerful minion type, but it's one of the most influential whenever it's gone.
Yeah, I think you just want to be pair gaming a lot more. Like if you want to just put it into
I do it all the time. So
yeah, Collins doesn't feel it right at all. It's like, what do you mean now we're gonna try for a 6? We always try for a 6. That has been the default game plan from the start, Shady. Yeah. No, for sure. It's a bit of a meme, but yeah, the way you play it is definitely less effective. Right.
Yeah. I end up becoming good at like reacting to like not having anything good, because I'm so used to that. It's like, oh, that didn't work out. Okay, how do I deal with this trash board, right? So I practice that a lot just due to the way of how I play. So I end up being good at seeing, oh, there's this one option here that you can do this, and then it works out for me. But it's not something I recommend, because it can sometimes be frustrating, because you're like, oh, if I only hit this, or if I only rolled into this, would have been very easy, but since I didn't hit it, I lose. It's like it feels very deterministic in that if you don't know how to recover, you feel like you're boiling your games out to this one specific point where it makes the game feel like more RNG. But once you get good at it, you can realize, okay, I didn't hit what I wanted, I can still recover, right? Like that's still an option in your head, where sometimes if you're not used to it, you're like, I didn't hit what I got, I guess I lose, right? You hear that people say that sometimes, but I don't really think it's that hit or miss, or that it's that one variable. There's always little things you can do in between to increase your odds and things like that, even if you don't hit exactly what you want.
Yeah, it's rare that you have a complete miss when you go for that triple. You can I think gas coil or both those units are like one of the more like good examples where you can totally just be on 5 and just find something, right?
Yeah.
You don't always need the super easy game where it's like, oh, I have Eliza, oh, I have Caligos, right? You can just make something happen while you're still strong.
Yeah. Is that all we want to talk about mech lobbies? I feel like there's more to talk about with this, but Yeah, whatever. We can.
I mean, there's always a lot to cover that. I think we want to keep it somewhat simple and most of all just actionable advice, right? So if you're in a non-mech lobby, play a bit more for triples into fives and sixes because you want to get those scaling units, as spamming on tier 4 is going to be a lot less reliable. No module, no egg, and just arm comp in general a lot less. You're pretty much solely reliable on Argus and Divine Shields when that happens.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. All right. Next topic we shall be talking about is going all in. What does it mean? Why do we do it? What is where does it go? You know,
That is a great picture. Make sure you watch this on YouTube, guys.
you say that every week, and you should do it every week. You know,
Yeah.
definitely. But yeah, I think it's one of those like concepts that I guess you don't need in terms of like on an average game, you don't necessarily have to sell your your light fang or whatever and then go put it in. But once you get into higher brackets, it's definitely it becomes a core concept. So it's a concept that you don't need initially. You can win games without doing this at all. Right. But then as you climb, you'll notice like more people doing it and it being like the sole reason they win. Right. I've definitely seen a number, like quite a bit of games that boils down to, oh, they had one more bubble than I did. That was the only reason they beat me here or they won that last battle, right? And then I look at my board and there's a brand on this in my ward band and just like, huh. I wonder if I could have done anything different, but I didn't, so I lost. But it generally refers to a concept of getting rid of your scaling, essentially your flexibility, the units that you're using to make your board stronger but isn't strong in itself, and replacing that with some type of counter card or bubble card, positioning card, whatever. Sometimes it's zap, sometimes it's selfless, sometimes it's a ghoul. Those type of minions that you don't want all the time. You don't want in every match, right? Like, do I want to play a zap in every single match? No. Do I want to do I want to ghoul every single time? No. But there are some specific windows where is ghoul really good here? Yes. Your opponent is playing Max, your opponent is George, your opponent is running scam pirates, your opponent has a spore, etc., etc., right? Selfless is like almost universally not bad. Like there's really a hard it's hard to say, oh, this extra bubble is bad for me here, right? So it's the universal. I can always put this in and feel good, especially if it's golden selfless, right? A lot of people keep selfless in their hand and wait for it to be golden, then use it at the very end to put two bubbles on the board, right? And zaps as well, right? If you're playing against people running barons, if you're playing against people running small like units that you need to kill that aren't easy to deal with otherwise, then zaps can do really well there. So it's those little things that you're selling, you're selling your scaling, right? You're selling your light fang. It means that, oh, I can't make my board stronger anymore, but I'm gonna have a better chance of winning the final battle, the next two, whatever it takes to win that lobby. So that's kind of how I look at it.
I think that sums it up nicely. Like one other thing that's really easy, you have your selfless, but you can also just use Spore or Maxna depending on
Right.
what type of composition the opponent's running. If you know they're just big minions, but let's say Mech, that's awful to add Spore or Maxna because they just have shields, and a lot of the time it will be Deflectos, which then regain the shield, and poison's obviously not very good running into a shield. But if you know that they are, say, straight up menagerie and mechs are out, for instance, right, and there's no module, then a lot of the time that poison unit might just go into a 40 health minion, and you're like, that Spore's pretty good here. So that's another units, or one or two units you can add when you feel like you need it. I think that the first step is to realize, okay, this is probably the last fight of the game. keeping the Slight Fang on his brand is probably a bad idea, seeing as if I win this round, the game's over.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the first step on your learning process. The more advanced play is when it's a top 4 or maybe even top 5 situation, but you cannot take another hit. You know you're going to die if you lose that fight, and you have a reasonable read on your opponent that they're really strong. That's when really good players can take average games into the top 4, where more beginners or intermediate players, they falter because they feel like they cannot sell the brand because the game's not over yet. But then the really good player will say, "Well, I cannot scale if I'm dead either, so I'm gonna I'm gonna just all in here, even though it's top 5. It's I might have 2 or 3 more rounds after this. I just I have to be as powerful as I can be here, and that means sell the Light Fang, or a lot of the time the Light Fang you can still make an argument. Well, it's like +8/+8 or +10/+10 to my board. So you really look at like, oh, I have a buff slot that I can still fill up, and then maybe the next turn you sell the Light Fang, right? But especially with Bran, when you're going into the round, the Bran is done, right? The Bran doesn't do anything anymore. So a lot of the time it's just sell the Bran for the Spore, sell the Bran for the Maxna, sell the Bran for the Selfless, and play a Barren and just try to get some more shields, like Colin says. And that's something that's a small thing, but it really allows you to take those mediocre games where you said, "Oh, come on, I was scaling so well and this guy was so strong." But if you had got on, then you could have maybe not won the fight, but you could have survived by taking less damage, or you could have tied or something like that. And that's really nice when you're climbing, to squeeze out those positive MMR games out of games where normally you would have taken like a -20, -40 hit.
Yeah, I remember one game we were playing, right? And I don't know if we were playing dragons or elementals, and I was like, "Oh, well, just continue scaling." And you were like, "No, get the get the finisher. You got to kill him now." And I was like, "Nah, it's fine." And you were like, "Okay, whatever." And then we barely lose, right? And I was
I
like,
didn't say anything. I didn't say anything.
huh, maybe I should have, maybe I should have went all in." You're just looking at me with disappointment. I was like, yeah, okay, I got you, Shay. But yeah, it happens to all of us here. Well, maybe not Shay, but it happens to
No, I
all of
mean,
us.
sometimes you really look at it like, do I really need to sell my Light Fang? Probably not, right? And then something really stupid happens. You're like, oh, I shouldn't have sold the Light Fang. Why did I sell the Light Fang?
Yeah,
Like, I'm not going to take 20, right? And then you take 20 yourself. Oh, God, no. Yeah, it happens for sure.
yeah, but it's definitely a good concept you want to use, especially when you're learning these things, just to be able to identify when can I be as strong as possible to increase my chances of winning, right? Sometimes that's not versus one when you're 1 versus 2. Sometimes that's when you're 3 versus 4, right? If you beat the 3rd place guy, there's no chance of beating the 1st place guy, and that might be the difference between ending 4th or ending 2nd, right? So there are different windows of going all in, and it essentially can be the difference between 2 placements, 3 placements sometimes. So it's definitely a good concept that you can utilize in all of your games if you feel it's necessary, and you like selling your brand, selling minions that you've had for the whole game. You're selling your mama bear. It's like, how could you? But sometimes it's necessary. You need the selfless bubble or zap or whatever. Yeah, it happens. Not too sad. All right, next thing we're talked about here is Aranna Elementals. I'm still just, it's this hero name, just quick aside, I keep wanting to say Ariana, but Ariana, that's what I want to say, but apparently it's wrong. Apparently, who would have guessed? Anyways, I think this is a good here. Well, good. This is a viable hero when the right situations arise and you get a good start. Definitely, I think Shay's been the one between the two of us has played it a little bit more and probably has a much more overarching view of the hero. But I do think it is viable. But you can kind of show us how it's done.
So to start things off, if we look at HS replay average placement on 12K plus, on tier 2 we've got something like Graybo, Alakir, Finley, and then it's Aranna. So like she's up there, right? Like not too far below, say, a Millhouse or a Baroff, just like a matter of 5 places or so. So she does get played, and she does gain MMR on average most of the time. The nuts is when you have a no Murloc lobby and elementals are in, and then potentially also beasts and demons. So the beasts and demons thing is a small thing that you shouldn't pay too much attention to. It's Starlisk plus Wrathweaver is the replacement to the elemental spam. But for the vast, especially when you're learning Arana, you're totally fine to just assume that you're going to be playing elementals, because the vast majority of Arana games are elemental games. So, how do you start things off? The first thing is, okay, what's in my first chop? How am I going to start off the game? Believe it or not, it's super viable to just roll 3 times with Arana if you don't get a desirable minion. So yeah, when I did Collins was like, for real? we're throwing, right? We're not doing this. Shady's just, that one of the desirable minions would be tokens, pretty much, because tokens would allow you to double buy on 5 gold. If you don't get a token, then it's super fine to just roll 3 times. Then on 4 gold, we level up, like pretty much every other hero. That doesn't reform curve. And then on 5 gold, depending on what you had, that's where it starts to be a little tricky, right? Where there's options. So if you have rolled 3 times on 3 gold, that means that on 5 gold, you're only 2 rolls away from activating Arana's hero power, which means that on 5 gold, you roll 2 times and you buy 1 minion for a total of 5 gold spent. You're targeting Molten Rock and Party Elemental. Those are the essential units for the composition, also referred to as Party Rock, right? Party Elemental, Molten Rock. And pretty much what you're doing, the very basics is you buy elementals, you play them, you sell them. That's how it is.
I
And
can
you
do
do,
that.
yeah, right. It's like, oh, just and then you're trying to keep, ideally, right, you would get 2 golden party elementals, 2 golden molten rocks, and then you'd have, a buff slot and 2 additional slots. Now, there's a lot of extra good supporting units that you can add. Something like Arm of the Empire is amazing because Molten Rock is going to have a lot of health, but not a lot of damage. And Arm of the Empire solves that. If you can triple for a 4-drop, Major Domo is probably the best triple, just because you spam so many elementals with this strategy that you just gain a ton of free stats by having Major Domo on your board. Earlier today, I had a first place game with Arana where I had a really, really good set of pulls there, but the champion of Yasharaj was one of my triples, and that thing scales like mad behind a huge Molten Rock. So that's one of the better triples as well. And then, of course, you can just do Gold Grubber. So usually my Arana wins, or my Arana really good games, the first one is Murloc's Rat. So stats are going to matter a lot more because poison is going to be a lot harder to come by. And the other one is I get to triple in something that gives me a threat other than the Molten Rocks. Because usually when you're playing Party Rock, you're going to have, like okay party elementals, but they're going to be like 20s at best. It's really the Molten Rock that has all the power, has all the health, all the damage. So if you can then get additional threats like Gold Grubber, like Champion of Yasharaj, you don't just die when they deal with your one big threat. The way you get around the poison units as well as to introduce additional taunts. So a naked module, or just, tripling into an Argus and taunting your your party elementals. It's going to mean that if they do get a spore, if they do get a Maxna, it doesn't just 100% target your Molten Rock. So that's another little tip, where if you get a bigger board, you can add extra taunts, and then if that spore goes into any other taunt in the Molten Rock, it's usually a win. that turn, because that will be a very common strategy people employ against Aranna. I'm up against Aranna. Let me just buy the Spore, put it in first, and there's a good chance it kills the Molten Rock. Yeah, other
So,
than that, it's your, yeah, go ahead.
something interesting that I'm noticing while you're talking is that you're not really talking about adding other elementals in the into the selection.
Yes,
What you're actually talking about is adding different threats that are not elementals. So you didn't talk about Cyclone, right? Which I think a
yeah,
lot of people think about when you're doing Ariana. Oh, triple, I'll put Cyclone, right? And I think that's interesting because you end up diluting those party rock buffs, right, into the
for sure.
cyclones instead of the molten rocks, instead of finding other threats that scale independently from the elemental scaling, right? That's why the champion, the gold grubbers are good, right? Because they're scaling independently. So you can focus those elemental buffs from the party elemental onto the molten rocks, making them a threat, while also having other units that are also scaling side by side. Where if you're picking up cyclones, if you're picking up the 7/4, the wildfire, right? You when you play elementals, you're diluting those elemental buffs. I think that's interesting that I haven't thought about consciously until you talked about it here, where it makes sense when you're looking for tier, when you get the triple and your tavern tier, you get a tier 4, right? Instead of looking for a wildfire and picking that up and buffing, right? Looking for champions, looking for gold grubbers, so that you could use those to scale independently and have those elemental buffs concentrated on those moltens, which have that huge health and stat buffs. So that's a cool thing,
Well, those are the good games, right? Now, it does happen, of course, that you pull an early Cyclone, and it's not like I'm gonna be like, "Oh, Cyclone, get it out of my sight!
Right.
Buffing Divine Shields, not in my stream." Right? No, of course, right? You still play it, you still buff it, but in the ideal scenario, you get just huge molten rocks, and then you just add the self scalers, right? The grubber, the champion. They're a great addition to the team. Um, a good question, right, is like, when do you level the 3, right? When is it worth it? Usually, you want to maximize the time you stay on 2 because that's where the party elemental and the molten rock are the easiest to find. Once we level the 3, we introduce a bunch of new minions into the pool, and Aranna does not benefit. Well, on 3, you don't introduce a new shop slot normally,
Right.
but Aranna, let's say going to 4, it does nothing for the shop because all the slots, because Aranna already has maximum shop slots. So it's totally fine to just stay on 2 until you either really want to use your triple for a 4 drop for the units we just mentioned, the grubber, the champion, the major domo, or if you just have what you need, which is, hey, I've got my 2 golden parties and I've only got 1 rock, and I don't think I've got enough time to build another golden molten rock. You can just level and say, let's just hit Arm of the Empire, let's hit any of the other elementals. That's totally fine as well, especially when the level starts to become really cheap, when it's hovering around 2, 1. Sometimes I'll even wait until it's 0 if I'm not satisfied with the amount of party elementals I've seen. So, but yeah, ideally, if you can get 2 golden parties, 2 golden molten rocks, you're totally fine to level after that. Sometimes, well, in most cases, you're gonna get 2 golden copies of one and 1 golden copy of the other. It's only in the really, the super solid games where everything just comes to you naturally. You're gonna get 2 golden parties, 2 golden rocks. But usually you're totally fine. It's the party elementals that's the really big engine. That's the one you
Parties,
really
okay.
want to chase. Yeah, if you can get the 2 golden parties, you can deal with 2 golden parties and only 1 rock. Only 1 golden party and 2 rocks is a bit more difficult. Then you're really gonna want Arm of the Empire triple to make sure that those molten rocks have sufficient damage.
That's That's good advice. I mean, that's good. I think it's a comp that not a lot of people play, right? Just because it feels weird, and especially they don't play it like you. I rarely see people like roll turn one, right? So it definitely has a potential, right? Even playing it normally, just want to throw it out there, right? Just for the people that don't like doing things different, right? I want to do things normal every time, right? You can play it normally. It's a lot harder to utilize the Aranna hero power when you're playing it normally, because you don't roll early. You really don't roll until you're like Tavern 4. That's really when you start rolling like organically, when you're not rolling early. So it makes you wonder, why do you pick this hero if you're not going to utilize the hero power in any tangible way, right? And you see a lot of people just committing to the party elemental strategy and doing well with it, winning games with it. So I definitely advise to at least consider a more, you know, low level elemental focus composition. I did see a game recently, just a couple of days ago, where someone was like second with beasts Sorreless scaling, right? He started with like 2 Sorreless. That I fought him super early. He had 2 Sorreless, and then the next time I fought him, he had like 5 or something Sorreless, right? And that was good enough. I couldn't even beat him the next time. I was like, oh, I lost to that. You know, that's how I felt. But yeah, it's fine. But yeah, definitely can be a very powerful hero if you get a good start and you're able to adapt to whatever they give you. And really, it's not a hero that needs a lot of adapting, right? Once you have 7 board slots, right, that's so many options of hitting the pieces you need. So it almost becomes easier because you have a lot of chances of hitting whatever you want. So definitely interesting hero, very fun to play whenever you get those really nice starts, right? Like anytime you can turn your brain off, good. This is a hero, you get a good start, you can turn your brain off, you know, just you know, elemental, go from there. And it's always fun when I get to do that kind of thing. So yeah, fun hero. Definitely wanted to talk about it whenever we can. And believe our last topic of the day is what are our thoughts on a casual BG mode, right? Like what is it good, is it bad, you know? What is the what are our opinions on it? Personally, for me, I think it would make sense, right? BGs kind of are, especially with perks, right? How perks are implemented, right? You can't really go and make a new account and be like, oh, this will be my casual BG account, right? It doesn't work because you're playing without perks, and that's a huge it's a huge drawback, because if you wanted to practice heroes and things like that, it's so much harder to be able to say, oh, I'm going to practice Rafam, when you only have 2 options out of 4, right? You're 50%, right? You have to play 50% more games, essentially. You know, that's you know, that the math is probably wrong, but just to have that same chance of hitting the hero that you want to practice and things like that, right? But when you're playing on your main, right, and you're like, oh, there's a new hero, I want to try it, right? Sometimes I'm streaming and I'm like, oh yes, play the new hero, you know, oh, play the new hero, and I'm just like, no. I can't do this to myself, you know. But if there was a casual mode, I could play a couple games, see the new heroes, see the new minions whenever they're added, you know, just full try it and see how strong they can be, if I can make things work and things like that, right? So it reduces the ability to really experiment, right? You essentially have to make 8-person lobbies, right? Like that's really the only way. I'm thinking, well, I guess technically 5-person lobbies, but no, the game would be different if it wasn't full 8, right? But then you're like, if you're playing with 8 lobbies, it's not the same, you know, it's not the same, like people are just gonna meme, you know, just cause like they don't care, right? Where if you're playing like normal BGs, right, people are still gonna try to win, right? They might meme more, but they're gonna try to win at the end of the day, right? And things like that. So it's even not the same, even if you were able to make your own lobby. So it just kind of it hurts, right? It kind of reminds me of what I was talking about earlier, right? Practice mode, where being able to be at tier 5 and not have a board and see if you can make a composition from there, right? With the options you're given, right? There's not a lot of good ways to practice except grinding day out on your MMR and like, dealing with the MMR swings on your mental and things like that. If you wanted to practice something specifically, right? It's really tough to do that. So I would love to see, right? I think what they always argue is that with Switch it would mess with the player base, right? You'd split the player base, right? But we've seen it in Wild, we've seen it in Constructed, right? They have Wild, they have Classic, they have Ranked, they have they have so many different game modes, and you find games in all of them. It's not like there's a dead game mode, right? It's there are games in every single mode, right? Because people find things they like, they find ways to utilize those modes. So I don't think it would be that big of a drawback, especially nowadays, right? We know BGs is consistent. There's a large player base, right? It's never difficult to find games no matter what region you're in. So I don't think it would be too big of a drawback to introduce that kind of thing. But that's my initial thoughts. You can definitely follow up on it.
Sure. Yeah, it's obviously just from person to person how you like it. I don't really. I would not be opposed to it, but I wouldn't really be
You
interested.
wouldn't
in it.
use it, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because I think you don't. So I like to play to get practice, and of course, right. Some other people like to just play and say, "Oh, let's do it for the memes." And I think for that kind of player base, it's a lot more. It makes a lot more sense because you can try to just hyper level to 5, and if it doesn't work out, whatever, you don't tank a -100. I like to play and get some quality practice in, and if there's no MR on the line, people just aren't going to play the way they usually play. If only it's slightly more off, or they try some more crazy stuff and all that. So I think that will sort of compromise the game, where it's not good quality practice, and it might even make you worse at the game if you've been practicing in normals and then like, oh, this is going really well, I'm going to take it to ranked, and then you get smashed there because people are they're not messing around anymore. So yeah, it's like, wow, everybody has a lot of stats on their board this game. That's crazy, right? What happened to all those power levels? Uh, I guess another concern voiced in chat is that if there's no MMR on the line, you get a bad hero pack, you're like, oh, I'm out of here. I'm not playing that crap. And then
Well,
there's so
then
many
fix the
ghosts,
heroes.
right?
That's a different problem, right?
Sure,
That's
right. But given the current state of the game, you don't get your Maev, you don't get your Afam, you don't get your Jandis, or there's no tokens. And you're like, whatever, concede, go next. I don't want to play this crap. So the amount of ghosts in the current implementation of the game would be just phenomenal. I think
I
your
can actually
standard,
see that.
right? Yeah,
That
your
one I can
standard
see.
would be at the very minimum 1 ghost per lobby, right? Where someone went like, well, fuck this shit, I'm not playing that. I'm out. Or, you open the shop, no token, I'm out. Like, how far can you push this, right? What? Not a triple? I'm off, dude. What the hell? I didn't triple. Only one Tidehunter, Bob? Are you serious? Yeah, so I don't know. It seems like it's nice in theory, but there's some practical implementation things we gotta think about.
I mean, that doesn't really happen in other game modes, but I could like in other like games of the similar genre, right? But I could definitely see it in Battlegrounds where people are like, you know what, I'm not playing these heroes. That it feels more of a discussion of the heroes and how strong like tokens are, more than the casual game mode, right? But I definitely can see it in this current state of BGs, right? If they were to add a casual, I could definitely see a lot of players, just leaving if they don't get what they want, essentially. Where, if all the heroes were like fun to play or at least a little bit balanced, right? You could see people would be more willing to try out heroes that they don't play, right? But sometimes when you pick a hero, you don't see a possibility of winning, right? And if you have 4 heroes of that, then you're like, I'm out. I'm already 8th. I'm just not gonna play it out. Yeah, and also having ghosts in the lobby changes the game so much, right? It would be hard to get good practice in that environment where unless you're practicing getting ghosts, then hey, maybe that's good practice there, right? But if that's not what you're trying to do, and it probably won't be for many people, it would be tough to keep people in the games, especially when they don't feel there's any reason to stay, right? Just go and look for a different hero or the hero that you want. What if you could choose the hero? Oh man, in normals, right? That would be very different, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. But then you get the metas where it would just be 7 people with the same hero, right?
No,
And
no,
then
no.
one person is cat or something.
You would just join a queue, right? Where you can't be placed in a game where everyone has the same hero, right? So then you would just be
Oh.
in a you'd be in a 45-minute jam this queue, right? Well, probably not, right?
Yeah,
But you know, like
I,
whatever is the more popular mode, right?
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Like fucking everyone wants to play
I
Janice.
would love. I'd rather just have like 5 Janices in the lobby.
Yeah, like, just go crazy, right? Go crazy. It's already a bit of a crazy mode. You can even
If that was
yeah,
normals, I would play that. I would, just to practice heroes and stuff like that. Like,
yeah.
oh yeah. Then I could see that actually. Yeah.
I think that would greatly reduce the number of ghosts per game. You would still
Yeah.
have people that would be
Yeah.
like triple. Well, not a brand. Well, I'm out, right? But
Yeah.
at least then you're a little bit more invested in the game at
Yeah,
that
and
point,
you can
right?
practice whatever hero you want, right? Like if the new hero comes out, okay, I'll just play it, And normals, okay, it didn't work out. Well, now we know, right? Where everyone
Yeah,
was
sure.
Jandis but me, doesn't work in that lobby.
Once, I don't think that would be too crazy of a thing, but that would open the door immediately to some more special game modes where you just say, oh, once we open the door to everyone can be the same hero, what else can we do, right? Like I just have to
Earth
think
mode,
about.
baby.
Yeah, I was thinking exactly that. I was thinking, well, League has Earth, where you could just be like, well, what if you gain 2 gold per turn instead of 1 gold, right? What if leveling would be cheaper? What
Yeah,
if, this
custom
and that?
settings for BGs, man, would be so
Then you could have these
crazy. Yeah.
insane, or you could have game modes where like everybody starts on Tavern 6. Let's
Yeah.
go, right? It's
Let's
like
just
right?
manually choose which minions we want in the games. Like no blacksmith, no
You could
Malgadon.
like,
Let's only Caligos Nadina. That's that's the only 6.
your shop is just empty, right? Until you get the tier 6. It's like no minions.
Oh yeah, sounds like sounds like a good time. Anyways,
All right. Yeah.
we talked about casual versus ranked, but we've introduced a little wrinkle. There are more things besides that. Different game modes would be interesting for BGs. Maybe that'll be a different topic one day. But just wanted to wanted to address it. Just the nature of not having any way to really practice or do anything specific. You just have to grind ranked if you want to learn the game well, right? And if you're new and you want to you want to dabble a little bit, right? Because sometimes when you're with a new account, right, those first games actually matter quite a bit in terms of how easily the rest of your climb is. If you lose like 5 games in a row when you make a new account, the rest of the climb becomes quite a lot harder, funny enough, just because of how they what attributes they put to your skill and your MMR and how climbing becomes. So it can be tough, if you're just a new player and you're jumping in and everyone else is just like destroying you, right? And it takes you like 20-30 games before you start like learning the meta, right? Then the climb becomes a lot difficult just because your MMR is already like in negatives. You're negative 100 or 1,000. You're just like, yeah. So it's gonna be rough, right? So I just wanted to talk about it a little bit, just see a discussion. But I think we had a good discussion here, good fun, and I think that shall be it for us this week. I think it was a great episode, a lot of fun stuff, a lot of interesting discussions about BGs. I've been having fun. I've been also playing a little bit of Arena, just dabbling, just to see how it is. It's been fun for me as well, just in general, just seeing the new cards and whatnot. But Arena, I mean, Battlegrounds generally, my go-to, just because it's been so consistent. It's always fun, and there's always heroes. I haven't played too much of the the new heroes. I played just a couple of games, but I still feel like there's more I could learn with those heroes. And just looking at their results, they haven't been too bad, right? I think they're both like Hooktusk is better, but Wagtoggle hasn't been like too far behind. It's playable for sure. So I think there's definitely a lot to learn when just to see how far you can take it. But generally that's been my experience. But I appreciate you guys for listening. Appreciate Shady for being here. Always consistent day in day out. All that good stuff. And you can find us on Twitch or YouTube or Twitter and all that good stuff. But any closing thoughts?
No, I had a great fun. It was a great episode, and Collins does put in the work every week to make sure we have these nice, smooth, graphics on the stream. So definitely happy that I pretty much just have to come on every week and talk about a game that I'm passionate about. So yeah,
Must be nice.
super nice. Yeah, it must be nice for sure. Yeah, it is. It's actually quite good. All right. So thanks to Collins to making sure that everything keeps running here. So
yeah, another thing, I've put the podcast on more platforms. I remember someone was talking about it was Apple Podcast or something, and I didn't have it on there, so I sent it on, as well as like Pandora and a bunch of other like little platforms I could find, iHeartRadio, all that stuff. So if you couldn't find it before, maybe take a look, see if it's in your favorite podcast directory of your choice, and if there's not, let me know and I'll see if I can add it on there just for you. So we'll see. Just take another look. If you couldn't find it before, it might be there now. So that's a last little update, I guess, for everyone there. But that shall be it for us this week. Thank you for having me, and we'll see you guys next week.